Hello gang, today we're going to talk about how to build a major scale. So make sure you have your manuscript paper out and you're taking notes. You're going to want to write down what I have up here. First, just write out your musical alphabet. A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Put another A above that so it's one octave above. And you'll see why in a little bit. The other thing you want to fill in are where your sharps and flats fall. So between A and B, put a sharp above it, and below it, put a flat. Between C and D, put a sharp above, a flat below. Between B and E, a sharp above, a flat below. Same thing between F, G, put that sharp up there, flat down here. And then G to A again, put a sharp up there, a flat down there. Now you'll notice between B and C and E and F, we don't have sharps or flats written in. If you remember, if you've ever taken piano lessons, you'll know that between B and C and E and F are already half steps. So, for instance, if I'm traveling from A to B, that's going to be a whole step. If I travel A to A sharp or A to B flat, that's called a half step. So, half step, of course, half and half equals a whole. But between B and C, E and F, those are the two white keys that are touching with no black key in between. So there's already the smallest interval we can have, which is a half step. You're going to want to use this for your reference as you build your scales. So make sure you write this out and keep using it, because it's really going to help you along as we start to build these scales. I'm going to give you just a couple more seconds to write it all out, because I'm going to erase it. Just be careful where you put your sharps and your flats. And don't forget, you can double check with your neighbor. Again, I'm not trying to trick anybody. I want you to know this information. I want you to know this so that as you read your music, it just makes it that much easier. You become a better musician, and things will start to make a lot more sense to you as you start seeing new music. It makes it so much easier to read your music the first time instead of the second, third, fourth, or 20th time. All right, here I go. I'm going to slowly erase it. Hopefully you have it. Okay, so I'm going to do the treble clef up here. I'm going to do the bass clef down here. Just look at that clef that you read in most often. Let me adjust the camera here. I can see that. Okay. Now, there's a pattern that we have that builds major scales. I'm going to want to write this down. The pattern for a major scale is whole step, half step, whole step, whole step, whole step, half step. Now, every time you're going to build a scale, I say write this out. Write it above it or below your staff, whichever is most convenient for you, because you're going to use this to cross out parts of the formula as we go along. Almost every time I teach this, people that do not do this step of crossing out always make a mistake. And if you make one mistake, it throws the whole thing off. It's just like math. If you're doing a bunch of addition problems put together and you mess up one of them, well, everything that comes after that is going to be wrong, unless for some reason you got really lucky and you got back on track by making a second mistake. But write this out each time. Whole, half. Whole, half. Again, we're going to cross out each of those as we go. So let's talk about the first major scale we're going to do. We're going to create the F major scale. So we talked about key signatures, and we know how those work. Now we're going to figure out how we write out the notes for that scale. So we start on the note F. Now bass clef, I'm going to start down here in this low F so we can stay in the staff. Now the first thing we have to do is go up a whole step. Now if you look at that chart, the pattern of notes that we wrote out at the beginning of this lesson, you start on F and you go up a whole step. A whole step above F would be G. Now I'm going to cross that out. That part of the formula is done. And this is where people make the mistake of not crossing it out, because they get off right away and they can't figure out why their whole steps and half steps are off. So then we go up to the next. part of the formula that says go up another whole step. So we're on G, we have to go up another whole step. Whole step up from G, if you look at your pattern of notes that you wrote out, would be A. Then I cross that part of the formula out. Don't forget to cross it out. Now we're going to go to the next one. So we look and it says it's a half step. What we know is we can see here, it's just going to go alphabetically, right? So the next note above that is going to be some sort of B. And a half step above A would be B flat. So we have to write that flat in there. And then we cross that out. Now how do we know? When we talk about inharmonic notes, and the inharmonic note for a B flat is an A sharp. But we can't have this be an A sharp here. Now this is where I'm talking about why they write it out, A sharp or B flat. Remember the inharmonic notes? The reason they do that is because it has to be the next note to build a major scale. Every letter name must appear at least one time in some form. And so if we were to use this as an A sharp, we would end up skipping B altogether. And that, of course, doesn't work in music theory. So we have to call it B flat because it's going alphabetically. F, G, A, B. But since it's a half step we're going, it has to be B flat. Okay? So now we're on B flat. The next part of the formula says go up a whole step. A whole step above B flat is C. Then we cross that out. Don't forget that. I'm going to keep saying it because if you don't do it, if you miss it once, you'll get off and you'll be like, I can't figure out what happened. You're going to start all over again and waste your time. Don't do that. Now we're on C. We got to go up another whole step. That takes us up to D. And then we cross that out. We go up the next whole step. Whole step up from D is E. Cross out that part of the formula. And now we have to go up a half step from E. Now remember, there are two spots between B and C and E and F where there's no sharp or flat indicated in that chart that we made. That's because it's already a half step. So now we go up a half step and that takes us up to F. And we cross that out. So the notes of the F major scale would be F, G, A, B flat, C, D, E, F. You should always start, and I have a couple of checks for you. You should always start and end on the same letter name. So we started on F, we should end on F. If we end on something other than that starting note, we did something wrong. We got to go back and double check. Now, we could end up starting on the same note and ending on the same note and still have mistakes in there somewhere. Again, that's one of those times you just got lucky and somehow you got back on. So what you want to do is you want to check. Do I have every letter name? Let's see. F, G, A, B, C, D, E, and F. So every letter name in the musical alphabet is appearing at least one time. And we repeat the first and last. The other thing is, we want to check, are there 8 notes? Well, let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There are. So we have 8 notes. So most likely we're correct. So we have an octave range here. 8 notes, octave, just like in our intervals. And that helps us just kind of double check. So we check, again, our checks are, do we start and end on the same letter name? Do we have each letter name in the musical alphabet appearing at least one time? And do we have 8 notes in our scale? If you do those checks each time, most likely you're going to be correct. So that's how you build a major scale. It's really simple. Again, as long as you follow the guidelines, write out that formula, whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half. Keep your pattern of notes chart handy, keep that available, and use it each time so you don't get lost in the mix of notes. And then just make sure to do your checks. You do that each time, you should be fine. Good luck. I'll be checking these over when I get back.